I just want to say that it's probably important before we talk about Twitter and social media and the use in India to talk about what it is. Some of you may not use social media or may not be as familiar. And some of you also may be curious about how it fits into the whole landscape of the internet. And for those who use the internet, which hopefully is everyone now, we know that it makes our lives easier. We transact, we create, we communicate, we search. We do all these things that empower us and make our lives easier, better, more informed, more entertaining. So what was the role of social media in the evolution of the internet? Why is it important? Why do we talk about it? I think we talk about it because what it's done is bring a human face to the internet. When we talk about the internet, we talked about blogs and URLs and all these terminology that we can't relate to as human beings. But with Facebook and with Twitter, all of a sudden the internet became about people. It became about faces and names, organizations and movements, and these are the things that we can understand. These are the things we relate to. And the opportunity to discuss and create and transact with real living people, real existing organizations and companies, this feels natural to us. And so I think it's not a surprise that Facebook has over 1 billion users and Twitter has hundreds of millions of users because it connects with something we understand, which is communicating with each other. I think it also connects with this feeling of needing to be a part of a community, to share and have a sense of common purpose. So if you're a part of a movement, if you're a part of a nonprofit organization, if you're a part of a company, or if you're just an individual who has an interest, to be able to tweet about something and have the delight of knowing there are hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of people who think like you do, who believe what you do, and to have a conversation with them, I think is very motivating. It's very exciting. And I think we'll hear, of course, right from within, what it's like to feel a certain way perhaps in Egypt and have the surprise and the delight of knowing that your views, which maybe you only thought you held, are actually shared by thousands and millions of others of people. And the power of that, the power of identifying movements that allow you to mobilize and act upon what you feel in your passion and actually make a difference and make a change, this is pretty compelling. So I think that's the importance of social media. Now, to talk briefly about Twitter, as a representative of Twitter, I'm a little bit more authorized to talk about what Twitter is and what it isn't. Twitter is essentially the global town square. It's the place where we talk, we discuss the issues of the day. It's where we debate, sometimes vigorously, sometimes we don't agree. But it's the place where you can see what each other thinks and feels and have a conversation. And for us, the goal is to provide a platform to the world that can be used so that all the world's conversations are happening in a transparent way for all the world to see, and so that it leads to better understanding and progress. And in India, such a diverse country, so many things going on, such a dynamic place, I think there's no place on earth that could benefit more from having a conversation that reveals the diversity and the dynamism of the country so that leaders and people who are in a position of power can listen, really for the first time, listen in a genuine way and make decisions that affect everybody based on what they're hearing from the people. And so that's what I think I'm very excited about, the topic of reinventing democracy, the role of social media, the role of Twitter. Looking forward to a good conversation.
Ahmed?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time in India. I came yesterday, will be flying back to Cairo tonight. And I've been attending some of the sessions since yesterday, and let me start out by stating that what I will fly back with is that there are great similarities between what you discuss here in relation to politics and the role of social media and what we discuss in Egypt. You have a great advantage in India, which is that you got your constitutional and legal framework right. We are still struggling to get our constitution and legal framework right. But otherwise, most of what I've been hearing in the last hours, especially last night's session among different Indian politicians and different focal points which they see politics having to address, on anti-corruption measures, on nationalistic as opposed to secular politics, on the role of religion and identity in politics. Most of that we do have in Egypt, and there are great similarities. And so I fly back with an interest in following Indian politics, and maybe an appeal to you to follow what is happening in Egypt, aside from sweeping generalizations, including on the role of social media as well. And that is my first point. I believe, be it in relation to Egypt or to countries such as Tunisia, Libya, Yemen, Syria, and elsewhere, we have an ongoing popular movement in Bahrain, which is for different Arab media-related reasons, and who controls what in the Arab media spectrum, in the Arab media landscape, has been completely ignored and sidelined in the last 2 years, which is as old as the Egyptian revolution and the Tunisian revolution, the uprising in Bahrain. Regardless where you look in the Arab world, we are in societies which are changing, and it's too far away and too early to describe what's happening, what has been unfolding in Egypt or elsewhere as a tragedy. And here I take issue with what was presented earlier today of the Arab Spring leading to a tragedy in Egypt and Tunisia and elsewhere. It's far from reality, and it's too far-fetched after 2 years. We are societies which are encountering massive change socially, politically, and it takes time. Democracies are messy, as it was said last night as well, and democratic transitions are even more messy when compared to stable democracy. So we are in a momentum of transition which should not be described as a tragedy. And social media have been playing a great role. And let me identify 3 issues in relation to what social media have been doing in the Arab world throughout the last years, increasingly in the last 2 years. Number one, they offer a forum to voice out people's concerns, and they offer that forum in a political spectrum which, even if we have elected institutions, in a political spectrum which is yet to garner legitimacy and to garner stability and trust in popular eyes. So we have elected parliaments in Egypt, Tunisia, and in Libya. We have elected presidents. We have an elected president in Egypt. We have elected legislative and executive institutions in the region. However, even if they are democratically elected, they lack popular trust. It's too early for them to garner popular trust. So social media come in to offer an additional platform for citizens to voice out their concerns. Secondly, accountability. And I very much enjoyed the presentation yesterday of one of the major people responsible for an accountability and oversight bodies in India. Social media do offer a great space for accountability, for holding politicians, public officials, elected as well as appointed public officials, accountable for statements, for policy steps, for actions, for misrepresentations of reality, which occur a great deal in politics. Politics is driven primarily by politicians' interest in getting to office or staying in office or being confirmed in office, and there is a great deal of deviations from reality which happens in politics. So social media offers that platform to hold politicians and public appointed as well as elected officials accountable. Number 3, social media in Egypt, and I can only attest to that, is the most diverse platform we have. It's more diverse when you compare it to official formal politics in parliament or in government. It's more diverse when you compare it to print media, to TV channels, where power relations and who owns what play a great role. It offers a greater space for diversity and a greater space for ideological differences to be accentuated and to be formulated and articulated in the public space. Real discussions in Egypt among Islamist forces as well as liberal forces, and I belong to a liberal front, which is the National Salvation Front, as was rightly mentioned, an opposition front, the major opposition front in Egypt. Most of our debating takes place in social media, not in formal political spaces such as parliament or in governmental meetings. It takes place in social media. So we have 3 roles to sum up: accountability, greater platform for diversity and for controversial ideological and political debates, and thirdly, enabling citizens to voice out their concerns and to be represented in how the public issues and public matters are being managed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Aziza?
Thank you. I'm Aziza from Dhaka, and thank you for giving us the opportunity, Shahbag movement, the opportunity to voice out what we have to say. We have heard about Arab Spring, we have heard about Occupy Wall Street, but a very recent and a very similar movement goes unnoticed, comfortably ignored by the international media that happened in Bangladesh. I'm going back 40 days back to a day which has a twofold importance in the history of contemporary Bangladesh. It was a day when people of Bangladesh felt betrayed immensely, and at the same time, it inspired the youth of Bangladesh like never before. I'm going back to a day when I myself felt I could die on the streets if I have to, but I will not leave until justice is served. I remember how speechless we all became that afternoon on 5th of February when Kader Mullah, a heinous war criminal and leader of Jamaat-e-Islam, was given life imprisonment and not the highest punishment according to Bangladesh's law, who is proved guilty of war crimes. I turned my laptop on to share my anger and frustration on Facebook and Twitter, and noticed an organization called Bloggers and Online Activists Network and their coordinator Imran H. Sarkar already created an event to gather together in Shahbag to protest the verdict that goes against our interest. Usually, you know, the human chains, they don't last for more than an hour. We come, we voice, we go home. But this special human chain went on like a wildfire. A question may arise, like what it took us for 42 years to unite. This is due to the spread of education, economic empowerment, and availability of information. However, for the past few years, due to the mass usage of social media, the youth of Bangladesh are coming to each other's contact and getting to know various aspects of the history that was previously not there. This constant contact and discussion forums on social media enabled the youth to finally unite. In 1991, under the leadership of Jahannar Imam, the mother of the freedom fighter, a social movement was initiated by Ghatok Dalal Nirmul Committee. Jahannar Imam wanted to re-establish the values of the liberation war among the people of the country. She also staged a mock trial for the war criminals in 1992. The mock trial is famously known as People's Court. We have been trying to repopularize the spirit through blogging for more than 6 years now. The Bloggers and Online Activists Network have been blogging to voice out the frustrations that Jamaat has been doing in Bangladesh and the trials that we really need to move on with and actually trial and give punishment to the war criminals. We have been voicing it in the blogs for the last 6 years now. And all of these activities emerged as a mass movement on February 5th. The total number of Facebook users in Bangladesh right now stands around 3.2 million. It's no surprise, therefore, that Shahbag began as a movement for social, personal, and national justice, aptly aided and propelled forward by social media like Facebook, Twitter, blogs. Although the movement took shape in the hands of tech-savvy, youth, urban, population, but Shahbag is now a home to millions of Bangladeshis from all over the world. Started as a Facebook event, the mass movement evolved and grew and actually demanded two very specific, clear demands from the people demands. One is the war criminals need to be to get the highest punishment, and Jamaat-e-Islam as a political party be banned. At this point, I must also let you know that the social media is also, we are also having a very big fight in the social media with Jamaat. They are very active like us in the social media. They have been empowered by other fundamentalist other global fundamental organizations. We are fighting for peaceful and harmonious coexistence of all religion ethnicities in Bangladesh, whereas Jamaat wants to actually establish fundamentalism in Bangladesh. Jamaat-e-Islam and its global network created a well-funded force working from different countries in the world to spread propaganda through international and social media. They are getting support from international fundamentalist organizations in order to fight back religious extremism or terrorism in the name of religion. We have to develop a global network with the support of humanists around the world. Jamaat-e-Shibir, the students' wing of Jamaat-e-Islam, has transferred their cyber war into cyber crime. They have been creating propagandas, putting it on social sites, thus creating deep divisions and confusion among general public. For instance, they targeted and hacked a blogger to death as he spoke against Jamaat-e-Islam. The guy was a known atheist, and that's why Jamaat has actually labeled us, the movement, as an anti-Islamic movement in the social media, which is not the case, because a country like ours, where 90% of the population is Muslim, the movement is not against Islam. The movement is against Jamaat-e-Islam, who are a terrorist criminal organization who does not believe in the sovereignty of Bangladesh. And we want to establish our very basic constitution that evolved around democracy, nationalism, social harmony, social justice, and secularism, which means similar to India, which is peaceful coexistence of all religion. I want the international media to actually look into the matter with proper attention and understand that this movement is about the justice that we want for the death of 3 million martyrs and 200,000 women raped in 1971. We are here, in Shahwag and all over the world, to demand justice for 1971 war crimes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Derek?
Kaveri, with your permission, because both at quiz shows and in Parliament, I'm not used to sitting down and speaking, so with everyone's permission, if I can stand and speak.
Please.
Yeah, because I'm just...
I can't deny a former quiz master.
Today, one college fantasy has finally come true. I did play a little bit of cricket in college and school, but I'm batting today at number 4, and still to come, Lara, Ganguly, Dravid. So, thank you, India Today, for making that happen. I just think I need to make, I was listening to everybody and very carefully to Bangladesh as well as to the gentleman from Twitter, but more so from Egypt. We'll try and tell you where I see the social media today and where Indian politics is. Well, for one, I would have preferred being invited to last evening's session, which was the real political session. This is seen as a Saturday afternoon kind of time pass. No. Okay. The Pope, or the new Pope, has been in the news for the last 1 week. So I thought maybe I can use this analogy to try and share with you, with this one analogy, where I feel the social media is with Indian politics. And for this, we have to go back to Pope John the 23rd. Pope John the 23rd, even if you're not Catholic, just let me tell you, he was around in the early 60s. And in the early 60s, he convened this meeting called Vatican II. Now, pre-Vatican II, the two things would happen in church. One, the priest would turn his back to the congregation and say the Mass. You know, in other words, that's the altar, and you're the congregation. He'd turn his back and say the Mass. That was 1962. And number two, all the church services were in Latin, except the announcements at the end were allowed in English. Okay. I think that's where we kind of are in the social media and Indian politics. In 1962, after Vatican II, the church changed two very important things. They stopped the priests from turning their back to the audience, and then the big change, they allowed the mass, Sunday mass and any other mass, to be held in different languages. So it wasn't only English, Bengali, Tamil, Gujarati, anything, Italian. So I think, to me, that's when this social media in the Indian political system, it needs a Vatican II. Till Vatican II happens, I'm afraid it will be the equivalent of Latin. This is one thought I want to share. You may agree, disagree, I don't know. This is the 15th Lok Sabha. In the 15th Lok Sabha, there are about 15, 20 people who are really crusaders of your brand, which you so beautifully promoted in it, really opening this debate or this session, or Facebook and everything else. I think by the time we get to the 20th Lok Sabha, I think there will be maybe 100, 200 members of parliament who are actively involved. Today, I think the good sign, in spite of what we said about Vatican II, the two major parties, the BJP, have pretty much got a head start on this because they were first off the box. The Congress party, the other large party, at least for the next few months, will also a larger big. At the current moment, sadly, there is only one regional party out of the so many regional parties who are very, very active on the social media, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, be it websites, be it the whole gamut, and that's the Trinamool Congress. And thank you, Kaveri, for acknowledging that and inviting me here. And the last little point I want to make, because we really want to see these batsmen come in, and I hope you have no questions to ask us, is 360-degree communication, which there are so many of my friends like Rohit and Swapan here from advertising, they'll appreciate this. Like, I think today, in a political party, especially I can talk on behalf of India, Amir, you did make the point that when you're in opposition, you need to get the social media, to express yourself. Here, thankfully, we have a wonderful forum where we can debate, deliberate, and legislate. And that is a few miles down the road, the Houses of Parliament. And we do that passionately, and we do that with a lot of care, and we are proud that we can still do that in India, and we do it well. Now, coming back to this last point about 360-degree communication, the political parties who will truly make a difference in the next 15, 20 years, this is, again, personal view, are those which straddle the street-side chai dukaan ka meeting, the wall postering, the wall writing in the constituency without defacing all the walls. They can have a small roadside meeting with about 50 to 100 people and get it down to the booth level. They can have a larger meeting at the crossing of an intersection of a road where they will have 2,000 people. They can have their large meeting with their neta with 50, 70,000 people. They'll also be present on all the social media, and I think one is not exclusive of the other. You know, one is not exclusive of the other, and I think this is where we are headed. So if there are people today who don't use the social media and view the social media as, nah, that's not where the vote bank is, I think they'll be in trouble 15 years from now. And it's the other way around, people who only believe that they'll use the social media and won't do the block level meeting and won't do the street level meeting. Well, that's where, as I see it, you know, in the 1960s, before the great David Gilby, the advertising great, made his mark, there was another guru in the making, and he came up with a concept called DM, which had nothing to do with direct messaging on Twitter, nor did it have to do with anything else. It was DM, the great Lester Wunderman, and he's still about 90 years of age. And Lester Wunderman was the great believer in direct marketing and direct response. And he's the person who invented at that time, you know, direct response, the mailer, the 1-800 telephone number. 50 years down the line, we've forgotten about Lester Wunderman and direct marketing, and the new medium, here we are, with another DM, which is digital marketing. Well, that's about it. Thank you very much. And since we are playing, are we going with the cricket or the Q&A?
Yeah.
Q&A?
We are going to do a Q&A.
Okay, you're dying to ask me about Mamta Banerjee and her Facebook.
obviously. So you might as well answer that question first, because your party is so active on social media, and yet your leader doesn't have a sense of humor. Why is that?
Okay. Two questions. Yeah, we are active on Facebook. In fact, I'll acknowledge that on the social media, not only Facebook. I think yes. Among the regional parties, we're the only party on Facebook. And the second is factually incorrect, actually. She's got a great sense of humor.
It isn't evident. She puts people in jail.
I think, you know, Kaveri, this is what I'd expect at a five-star audience in Delhi. I think the social media itself is an evolving process. And I think some of the stuff which goes onto the social media, it can be dangerous. And I think the beautiful thing here is that it's an evolving media. It's an evolving media. We learn as we go along. I think there's nothing wrong with the process of learning and evolving. Because the more you learn, the more you evolve, you'll get where you need to get. So the only correction I want you to make is that Mamta Di doesn't have a sense of humor. In fact, thanks for the idea. Next year, we'll come up with a book of jokes, her favorite jokes.
Edited by you. Okay. Shailesh, I needed to ask you, this was a sort of question leading on from there. What do you do when governments ask you to block accounts? When governments tell you that so-and-so handle has to be blocked?
So I think anytime you have a new product or a new technology, it's the same thing I used to deal with when I was at Google here in India, is any new technology is easily misunderstood. And usually the reaction is first with fear. Oh, it's going to change things. I can't control the flow of information. I can't control things. So the first thing to do is to engage and just talk with the key stakeholders. I'll point out my colleague Rishi Jaitley here, who's based in India and focused on making sure that all the key stakeholders, law enforcement, government, companies, media companies, that we're educating and making sure they understand how social media works, how to use it. And usually when we do that, the worry, the concern, the fear goes away, to be honest. So the first thing is education, engaging, conversation. The second thing is if there's truly something that is illegal, then like anything else, we would work with the appropriate government agencies to make sure that if it's inappropriate content that's illegal, that we do something about it. So I want to make it very clear that the goal from the perspective of Twitter as a platform, or really any technology platform, is to operate within the rules of the society and to operate within the governing laws of the country. And just like anybody else, that would be our focus too. But at the same time, the most important thing, especially with a platform like Twitter, is to defend the right to have a voice and to not use laws and not to use rules to depress the voice or to squash the voice. The key is to use these platforms to make sure that all the relevant voices are heard. Minority voices, majority voices, voices of the powerful, voices of the not so powerful. So the key thing is to make sure that that fear and laws and policies are not used to actually silence parts of society, because the intention of these platforms is to make sure everyone has a voice.
So what's your position on 66A of the IT Act?
Well, I think in general, every country, okay, I won't speak specifically to that, although I could, but I won't. But I think
Which is why?
Well, specifically, because I think there's a general point. In my role, I was just in Brazil and Japan and Korea, now in India, and the same issues come up all the time. You have laws and policies that are out of step with the times. There's a telecommunications law in the US that was written in the early 20th century. It didn't even contemplate the internet, right? And so there's a lot of work even going on in the US about how to update that and make sure it comes in line with the reality of today, which is the internet. So I think there's a machinery that's in government which sometimes doesn't move as fast as the actual society itself, doesn't move as fast as the marketplace or the private sector. And my general view is that when you have a platform like Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, that an open platform that promotes everybody having a voice is a generally good thing. And we should find ways to make sure those voices are heard in a way that's still consistent with the laws of the country. So there has to be a number of updates to policies in India to make sure that third-party publishing of content on open platforms is encouraged.
Okay. Amir, I wanted to ask you, we heard earlier in the day that Egypt was a tragic case. Do you feel that social media is more powerful and more effective in actually toppling figures of authority and actually, you know, in a way destroying figures of authority than actually creating something new? Do you feel that?
Well, it's definitely a very good question. Let me start by once again restating my point that it's far-fetched to describe the reality in Egypt today, or in Tunisia for that matter, or Libya as a tragedy. We are in a momentum of change, and it takes time, and it's bound to take time, and I appeal to international media as well not to treat Egypt and Tunisia out of any particularities, perceived particularities of Arab societies different as Eastern European or Latin American countries in earlier stages of their democratic transitions were treated. On average, it takes time, it takes a decade to fix democratization processes, to get them right, and to build institutions. And once again, most of what I heard last night in a very interesting session was about deficits in institution building and how to make parliaments more of a viable place. Yes, happily we debate in parliament, we deliberate in parliament, we legislate in parliament, but still in early stages of democracy, you have to have additional forums, and one of them is, to my mind, in Egypt, and I believe elsewhere, social media. Now the question becomes, do they give incentives to create and deliver new authorities, new models? And what I'm referring to is less personalized and more driven by models, new ideas, new visions. Yes, they do. Social media, Twitter and Facebook are very vibrant, not only in holding politicians accountable, but in generating new ideas. I have close to 1 million followers, and trust me, most of them do not agree with what I do, do not agree with what I put forward, but we have a very vibrant discussion, and we benefit from it. As a nation which is beginning its first steps in democratizing its polity, it's much needed. Once again, if you approach that reality focusing on negative components, as it was said last night by one of the speakers, that, well, you end up having politicians discredited, having politics as a space, as a domain discredited, and pushing people away from politics. Well, those negative phenomena, we have to endure them. We are trying to build a culture of plurality, a culture of debate, a culture of diversity, a culture of pluralistic deliberations in parliament and outside, and social media definitely add to it. So we should not approach it by what is happening now, but with more of a focus at the long run, and be restrained in putting forward sweeping generalizations which do not correspond to reality.
Okay, my last question to Aziza, and then I'll ask all of you to raise your hands and ask questions. What do you do when the enemy uses the same tool that you do? In your case, the Jamaat.
We actually do the same thing that we do on the roads, on the streets. We fight, we counteract. We actually, when what happens usually, I give an example, for instance, like I give a tweet saying Jamaat-e-Shibir is a terrorist organization, and using hashtags for Al Jazeera and BBC and CNN and everyone, a Jamaat-e-Shibir activist will instantly come up with a reply, like, don't lie, Aziz Ahmed, that's not the fact, this is not what's happening. And, you know, then what happens, the entire crew, like our team and their team starts fighting, and actually what happens in the process, at times the main message gets lost. And this is very important because when both of us are trying to voice our own opinions, and at the end we start attacking each other, and the actual essence of the fight goes down. That does not come up. So this is a problem that we're facing right now, because Jamaat is doing type propagandas that they've seen Saidi on the moon, and they've been tweeting. And
that's all Shailesh's fault.
Exactly. But you do that. Why don't you just delete the tweets?